When you hear this, what does it remind you of?
Hawaii.
Hawaii? Where did you hear this song from?
Lilo and Stitch.
I heard it in the movie Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch.
The purpose of this film is to exemplify how icons are used within American culture media. And icons is a sign that represents something, usually through a resemblance of the object and sound experience together. So, in saying that, how does the icons of Pacific Islander music within mainstream culture affect the perceptions of people within American society?
Well, I think authenticity has to do with trying to represent what is truthful to a person. So if you're thinking of like authenticity in terms of culture, that's a very difficult question because, you know, a dance, let's say in my island from Guam that was done 100 years ago, you know, that's an authentic dance. But a dance that's created tomorrow, you know, could also still be like an authentic cultural dance. So authenticity, I think a lot of times is trying to get to notions of what is represented as true, maybe the true artistic form, or people trying to deal with what is issues of representation.
I think authenticity just means knowing who you are and expressing it in ways that you feel represents you.
Authenticity to me is defined through a multiplicity of practices of identities. So that means every Chamorro, or every Samoan, or every Palauan, or every Hawaiian has one piece of puzzle to what I call the Pacific Islander world, or the Chamorro, or the Palauan, or the Hawaiian or Samoan world. And so when you hear Pacific Islander music in films like Lilo and Stitch, for example, at the beginning of Lilo and Stitch, the opening, you hear a Hawaiian song, and people don't know that the Hawaiian song is a chant that was created for the last king of the Kingdom of Hawaii, King David Kalakaua. So music in the Pacific, the way it's understood is music is something like a story. So it's shared, it's meant to influence, it's meant to also be embraced by a newer generation and then retold and then rechanged.
Personally, I love our cultural music when it's played out of context. For example, like in Lilo and Stitch, the beginning song, that was the King song, it's upsetting because I understand that they might want to portray and like put our culture out there like, hey, come check this out, you know, it's cool, it's this, it's that, but really they don't have the meaning or the history behind it, so it doesn't mean anything to them. They're just kind of selling our culture, and as they continue to sell our culture through the clubs and through movies and through other ways in mainstream media, as you put it, it's killing our culture. And so little by little they're taking from us, and without the acknowledgement of wanting to even know the history behind it, I think that's really offensive and it can hurt ultimately, and it's another form of oppression.
And I think there's two different audiences we have to address when thinking about this. There's your mainstream, Palangi people like everyone in America, and then you have your indigenous PI people, or just PI people in general that are from America. So there's actually three. And then you have the real people from the island, the jungle, the rock, whatever you want to call it. So each three of these audiences, they have their own take.
I think on the one hand it's really good because it gives the people exposure, you know, and then they start to hear about Pacific Islander artists. But I also think sometimes it can be, you know, problematic because if people don't have the right context of certain music, it sometimes can lead to stereotypes that people have.
There's like a plus to that. It's like exposure, because I mean, like, one of my favorite movies is Lilo and Stitch, But I mean, like, there's not a lot of people who know about Pacific Islanders, and even just to get like a Disney movie featuring Pacific Islanders or like the Pacific Islander culture or something is like a huge step. It might not be like the true culture or like what the culture is mainly about, but at least it's something about the people.
You know, there's a lot of songs that are being remade today, and it's funny because with the island music, everything to me sounds like it's being recycled and the same themes are being presented, and there's nothing wrong with that, but at the same time the meaning of the song, the authenticity of it, it's lost when it's performed, because you could take a Tongan song and reword it and everything, the beat and everything to like other words, you know, like different lyrics from what the original lyrics were, like in a different language. But then that can also be put into like an English translation. But at the same time, that whole meaning of what that song is, it's lost in the translation, because not always do you have music that, you know, can translate into English properly. There's songs that have a deeper meaning behind it, what the words are actually talking about.
I hope people will understand how they perceive Pacific Islander music and you know, music in general in American culture. I really hope that you're able to open up your mind to all the possibilities, and not just to look at music as entertainment, but as also a learning opportunity to know the history and culture of that song. To not understand the history, historical context of the music is really disrespectful to the people.